Today I have a new interesting RC airplane. So this is the Derbee C400. I think it's modeled after a Cessna C400. I mean, it's a great looking RC airplane, and I think that this plane reminds me of kind of the Cirrus SR22T. Overall just a greatly designed plane in general. And I mean, I have some things to say about this RC airplane, but first let's go outside and fly this C400.
Landing flaps.
So this is kind of the third flight I have on this C400, and I used just landing flaps because I know that during the morning, then when you have kind of mist and the grass is really damp, and you have a tricycle gear RC airplane, it just becomes very sticky. So that's why I used just full flaps for this plane, and I made some adjustments just to trim mostly the elevator because it was just pitching up a little bit too much. Although I did center the horizontal control surface, then the elevator, I still needed some down elevator for this one to fly level. I did set up flaperons then, so that's 10% for half flaps and 20% for full flaps, and that just worked just great. So I didn't make any adjustments after that. I'm flying this on a 3S 1300 milliamp battery, which is kind of the recommended battery. And first I set a timer for 5 minutes, but I really think that you should do at most like 4.5 minutes of flight, just because I ended up with kind of a 9% battery left when I did a 5-minute flight. So so far I think this plane flies really good. It's not the really an agile plane, so in comparison you have the X-Fly P68, which is smaller than at 850 millimeters, but it's really agile and rolls crazy fast. So this is more gentle and more in line with what it is, general aviation low winger, so it's not as sporty than as some other low wingers I've tried. So my old trusty Hobby King TL 2000 is a more snappy RC airplane, but this one is equally well controlled. I think with the full flaps you can crawl around. It's not as slow then as, for instance, my E-Fly Cherokee at 1.3 meter. So let's go on the landing here. Really smooth, and when you have kind of, this plane doesn't weigh too much, and you have at least this grass is kind of soft, it's really easy just to get the tricycle gear RC airplane down. You can see the gas is a little bit sticky. I didn't want to just pull full elevator because then it will just kind of jump up in the air, which is ugly. I think orientation wise you have stripes underneath the main wing. You also have these navigation lights, which I think that the front landing light then shows very well. I don't think that the kind of the navigation spots on the wingtips are that visible. But just with kind of 100% rate on this plane and 30% expo, it is a well-controlled plane. Feels really solid when I fly this C400. So the roll rate then is okay. It's not really sluggish, but it's not fast either. I would just say that this plane is well tuned as is, if you want to fly it like scale-like, or if you want to fly more like gentle aerobatics. I think it works just fine. Of course, these low wingers might be kind of the plane you pick when you want to do lots of aerobatics. I think it's a really nice size also at 1100 millimeters. It doesn't feel really sleek with this wing also, and the fuse is not really that large. And really solid flight. I have just a tiny bit of wind today, so it doesn't influence the plane in any way. It's going for a landing. And the next round then just had a little bit too much speed. Let's go downfield. lower throttle and just let it drop. And then when nearing the ground, just flare and release it. I really didn't know what to expect. I had my hopes that this would be a great flying RC airplane. And in fact, I think it is a great flying RC airplane. It's not really too agile, so in comparison then, I have kind of the E-flite Cherokee at 1.3. I think the Cherokee is a much more aerobatic and fun RC airplane. But I think that the key advantages of this RC airplane is, I mean, 1100mm is really small. I think it goes to around 675 grams. I don't know if that's with a 1300 3S battery or not. Really good prop noise, really low noise from this RC airplane, 3-bladed prop. And this is a tricycle gear, so you do have a nose wheel, which is a vulnerable spot on most planes then with nose wheel. And the negatives then on this RC airplane, I can say right away that during the assembly of this RC airplane, there were just a few things. So first off, these kind of stickers, I mean, I really love stripes underneath the wing. It just makes orientation fantastic. But these stickers then, they are just loose on almost all the edges. So when it comes to the stickers, a really poor thing then. When it comes to the landing gear, I mean, the nose wheel is already assembled, but the main landing gear then you have to assemble, and more or less, I mean, they are just as this out of the box. You put them into this slot, but there is no screws to hold them in place. So if I were to fly this RC airplane, surely these landing gears would just fall off the RC airplane, which is really stupid because there are two holes then to mount a screw, and I just picked a kind of washer and also a small screw just to fit it. But there's no mention in the manual, and if you don't do this, the landing gears will just fall off the RC airplane. So really stupidly done. I also think that, I mean, there's just a tiny bit to give to the landing gears, really hard wheels then. But on the other hand, I think that this plane, when you have at least a good space, it just slows down really well with flaps. I mean, it's really smooth landing with the kind of most RC airplanes, and in comparison then, if you have the Cirrus SF22T at 1.5 meter, it's a really heavy RC airplane. So if you just kind of go down too steep, it will bounce and just look really ugly. This plane then landings on smooth grass was just excellent and fine. I also think that on this plane, you have to glue in the rear section. So this rudder piece then, and also the horizontal stabilizer. And I think that, hey guys, it just don't do glue RC airplanes anymore. It's just stupid. I think that they could have just solved it by making the box just a little bit different when it comes to the packaging, and then have the rudder piece attached. And then for the stabilizer, I think that they could have just used the screw to mount it. It would just be really great and not costing anymore, I guess. Also, I think that you have kind of this plastic piece in front of this plane if you want to access the motor and kind of also the nose wheel. But just by removing these screws, I didn't really had the chance just to pull it off, because I guess somewhere there's just some glue or something. So I don't want to do it before I really need to. I also think that the spinner then on this RC airplane, they could have made a better mount on the spinner. Now I think it's good as is, but just looking at FMS RC airplane, I think that they make better spinners. When it comes to the interior of this RC airplane, so you have this hatch, and I experienced on one flight then, I thought that I had this hatch, this canopy part just mounted, but it flew off straight after takeoff, so really odd. There are no Velcro straps or strips then just on this plate, so I put them on. You have a strap, but the strap then, if you just use a strap, the battery will just move back and forth. This comes with a speed controller, a 30 amp speed controller. There is an extra lead to the speed controller, and I tried to hook it up just to see if I could do reverse thrust, but no such luck. It does feature an XT60 connector. You have a lot of cables just to hook up connectors for the wing, because it's a really featured wing, lights, flaps, ailerons. I have an AR637T mounted over here, and here comes an interesting problem, because I know that other users of this RC plane also run into this, but the linkage then for the rudder and the elevator, they just goes from these two servos over here towards the rear. And when you move the servos, this linkage, this kind of a steel wire, just bends and looks really ugly. So what I did, I had to just pick a few plywood pieces that I cut to make kind of an additional guiding slot then just for these servo wires, just because I don't think that if the kind of the linkage just starts to bend, you won't really get the great control of the RC airplane as you might need. When it comes to scale details, you have this antenna. You can also mount steps on this RC airplane. I didn't do the steps, but I did mount the antenna. So, I mean, just a few things then, because I think that the landing gears, a few screws, these linkages really poor. The tail thing that you have to use glue. But just looking past these issues then, I think it's a great flying RC airplane, and certainly when you fly slow with this, it won't really bite you. It's really gentle and lightweight, makes that you can fly it slower. The flaps does slow it down really nice also. Maybe not as slow as, for instance, then the Cherokee from E-flite, but certainly just fine. I also think that the great thing, although these just tapes are about to get loose, I think it was a really good design choice then to have stripes on the rear stab and over on the wing as well. I'm not really sure about the longevity of this nose wheel then, as with all RC airplanes and tricycle gear, nose wheels are really vulnerable. This kind of a foam piece is already loose, so just took kind of a little poor landing. So let's see how this planes hold up over time then. So overall, I think that it's a good flying RC airplane, not the most agile. A bunch of kind of a construction misses in my opinion. Great look on this RC airplane. So I mean, that's just some thoughts then for now, and I'll surely come back to this C400 because I think it's a really nice looking model and it's fun to fly.